Now we're getting into Romanesque art. And the Romanesque era takes its name from its defining characteristic, the fact that it's Roman-like, or in the style of the Romans. And this is actually a 19th century pejorative, or insulting label, created by architectural historians. Now, Roman monuments in the medieval landscape are everywhere. We have a lot of Roman ruins. Some of them are still being used, often for other functions. Early Romanesque architecture is generally going to be austere with little decoration and a focus on rounded arches. Quickly, we're going to see an emphasis on sculptural embellishment. In other words, additional sculpture added to these very austere, simple buildings. And there's no single uniform definitive style. Instead, we see a lot of regional variation and a rise in some artistic identity. In other words, we start to know who the artists are here. Now let's talk about the religious mood, where around the year 1000, and much like during the transition to the year 2000, a lot of people, well, for lack of a better term, freak out. And they assume that you will have the end of the world at the year 1000, just like we thought there would be at Y2K. And as a result, people will either become incredibly hedonistic or incredibly religious. Now, when nothing happens, we see a sense of relief, and suddenly all these parishes that haven't been building because they thought the world was going to end are going to need to build. The people who are hedonistic are probably going to turn back towards religion, realizing they are error in their ways, and those who became religious are going to remain religious. So we're going to see a lot of people drawn to religion, which means we have a lot of money coming into religion and consequently a lot of construction. A couple other things that are happening around this period. We will have the Crusades, where armies of Europe go to liberate the Holy Lands. Out of all the Crusades, the First Crusade is the only successful one, and there's lots of things that happen during them. Here's 8 of the Crusades, or 5 of the Crusades, known as the 1st, 3rd, 4th, 7th, and 8th, although there is a 2nd, there is a 5th and 6th, etc. There's also the Georgian Crusade, which was supposed to be the state of Georgia along the Black Sea, sending its army. And unfortunately, the Mongols will show up unexpectedly and completely destroy the knights of that crusading army. We will see the Fourth Crusade, which decides that it's a lot easier to sack Constantinople than anything else. And we will see the Children's Crusade, which will try and leave from Marseille with 30,000 children and sail to the Holy Lands. Actually, originally they were going to walk to the Holy Lands across the Mediterranean as the sea was supposed to split. But when they show up, the seas don't split, but there are these really helpful ships that happen to be hanging out to help these 30,000 children from across Europe to the Holy Lands. Unfortunately, they do kind of turn out to be slave ships, and the children are never heard from again. But the Crusades, as a rule, well, really they're failures. But they do one thing. They bring back relics. A great many bodies are coming back from the Near East. And many of these bodies are not actually the saints they claim to be. Many of them are just bodies that are found, and they simply say, oh, this is Saint so-and-so. Very, very common. And relics are basically dead saints or bits of dead saints. So we have St. Catherine's fingernail or someone's skull or someone's finger. We have no idea, for the most part, until recent times, whether they're real. And an unusual number of DNA tests show them to be of Middle Eastern descent and definitely not from the period that would be claimed. So take from that what you will. Consequently, these relics come back and people get interested in them. This leads to pilgrimages, basically Romanesque or medieval tourism, where they're going to go, if at all possible, to see some of the best relics across Europe. They're going to go to see the Veil of St. Mary or the Shroud of Turin or whatever else. Oftentimes, these pilgrimages will also take place going to the Holy Lands, which we've already seen in the chapter on Islam. But when you're on this pilgrimage, you have to stay somewhere. And that's going to be key because these people will stay at various churches along the pilgrimage routes. And those churches are going to get money because generally you're going to donate to the church when you stay there. Consequently, the churches will feel the need to expand so that they can accommodate more pilgrims, bring in more money, and it just builds from there. So this is really laying the foundation of what we're dealing with in the Romanesque.